started like any other day. Claire had just finished a grueling project at work and was finally taking a breath. She had scheduled a routine checkup, something she did every year just to be safe. The sun had been shining, and the office had buzzed with the excitement of a late afternoon meeting. There was nothing about the day that stood out, nothing that could have prepared her for what was to come. She sat in the sterile doctor's office, flipping through a magazine on the table, her mind still on the pending project at work. The doctor entered, a polite but distracted figure, carrying a clipboard. She had been here before, done this routine dozens of times, and always walked out without a second thought. Today, though, something felt slightly off. The air in the room seemed heavier, thicker, like a storm was brewing just outside.
Claire.
The doctor began, his voice a touch more serious than usual.
We've received your test results.
He paused, glancing at the paper in his hands before looking her in the eyes. His gaze held a weight that immediately unsettled her.
I'm afraid the test shows something concerning. You have early-stage breast cancer.
Time seemed to stop. The room around her blurred, and her heart raced. The doctor's words echoed in her ears, but the meaning didn't connect. Cancer. The word struck her with such force that it felt foreign, as though it belonged to someone else, not her, not Claire. Her mind couldn't grasp it. For a brief moment, Claire felt as though the ground had dropped out from under her. But it wasn't the kind of drop that comes with a fall. No, this was an empty feeling, a void that swallowed all sense of reality. She stared at the doctor, unsure if she had heard him correctly.
You're telling me I have cancer?
Yes. It's still early, and there are treatment options available. We can.
I don't believe you.
She interrupted, her voice a little sharper than she intended. She stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor.
There must be some mistake. My family has no history of this. I've felt fine. I'm fine.
She tried to brush it off, almost as if saying it enough times would make it true. She felt like a performer trying to convince herself that this wasn't a script, that she wasn't the lead in some tragic drama. Her hands trembled slightly, but she folded them tightly in front of her, as though to hold herself together. The doctor's eyes softened, and he spoke again, slower this time.
I know this is a lot to process, Claire. It's natural to be in shock. But I assure you, the results are accurate. This is something we can treat, but it's important we begin immediately.
The word treatment seemed to float in the air like an impossible concept. It felt like it had no connection to the life she had been living. She wasn't the person who got cancer. This was a mistake. Mix-up. She was too healthy, too busy, too strong.
I'll get a second opinion,
Claire said, her voice growing more forceful. She had to make it go away. This isn't real. She stood up quickly, moving toward the door. The doctor didn't stop her, but the look in his eyes lingered long after she had left his office. Outside the hospital, Claire stood frozen in the parking lot for several minutes. The world around her carried on with its usual hum, but she was removed from it. She wasn't part of it. She wasn't the kind of person who could be touched by something like this. The wind tousled her hair, but she barely felt it. Cancer. She pulled out her phone, her hands slick with sweat, and made a call to another specialist, someone who would tell her what she wanted to hear. But when she hung up, her throat felt tight, the words stuck somewhere in the air that wouldn't let them come out. The following days were a blur of appointments. She sought out one doctor after another, visiting the best hospitals, consulting with renowned specialists. But each one echoed the same diagnosis, the same blunt, clinical words. Cancer. With each consultation, the lump in her throat grew. But Claire fought it. No. This couldn't be her story. She convinced herself that something was wrong with the tests, that they had mixed up her results with someone else's. She clung to that hope with a desperation that consumed her. But behind that stubborn determination was something else, an undercurrent of fear, one she refused to acknowledge. As she walked out of yet another consultation, The sky had begun to darken. The air had a chill to it, and the sounds of the city seemed to shift, growing muted and distant. Claire, who had always been the one to stand tall in the face of difficulty, found herself almost collapsing under the weight of the world. Why her? Why now? But she still couldn't let it in. Denial was like a veil, thin but impenetrable. She couldn't face it, couldn't say the words out loud. Instead, she took a deep breath and texted a friend to meet her for coffee, all the while pretending that this was just another bump in the road, something that would go away with a little time. The diagnosis had come, but Claire wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Not ever. The first time Claire walked into the chemotherapy ward, the cold, fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker ominously. The sterile beige walls stretched endlessly, and the faint hum of machinery was a constant reminder that this wasn't her world. She had been to hospitals before, but never for herself. She had always been the one sitting in the waiting room, flipping through magazines, checking her phone, content to wait for the others. But now she was the patient. She stood in the hallway for a moment, feeling like an outsider. The other patients, some with scarves wrapped around their heads, others with pale, thin faces, sat quietly in the waiting area. Their eyes were distant, lost in a world she couldn't fathom, their experiences something she couldn't relate to. They were sick. They were dying. But Claire, no, she wasn't like them. This wasn't her fate. She was just here for a quick fix, just here for a little treatment. She didn't belong in this room, in this place, with these people. Her nurse, a gentle woman named Rachel, called her name softly, but Claire was almost reluctant to respond. She had no intention of letting herself slip into this world of sickness. Not yet. Not ever. She forced a smile as she walked towards the chair, trying to ignore the dizziness that threatened to take over her senses.
"How are you feeling today, Claire?"
Rachel asked as she guided her to the recliner, the cold metal arms of the chair almost like an anchor.
"I'm fine,"
Claire replied too quickly, settling into the chair with a forced composure.
"Really, just a little tired, but nothing I can't handle."
Rachel paused, looking at her with a gentle, knowing expression. She must have seen it before. The reluctance, the denial. But Claire wasn't ready for anyone to see her vulnerability. She couldn't be. The first round of chemo was brutal. It started as a slow drip, a cold sensation running through Claire's veins. She barely registered the medicine entering her body. She was too distracted by her thoughts of the office, of the project she had left unfinished, of the party she was supposed to attend next weekend. All of that seemed so far away now, so distant from the reality of the sterile room she sat in. She tried to focus on the familiar rhythm of her breathing, but the medicine felt like a heavy weight in her chest, pressing down on her lungs. She wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't supposed to be her life. She was supposed to be on vacation next month, not hooked up to N4. She closed her eyes, trying to block it out, pretending that if she just ignored it, it would go away. But the nausea slowly began to build, the queasiness that started in her stomach and spread through her body like poison. It was a subtle thing at first, almost easy to ignore. But soon, it felt like a burning fire in her veins. She gripped the armrests, trying to steady herself, but her body wouldn't obey. She felt her heart race and her breath shallow. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't stop it. As the days wore on, the chemo sessions became a blur of exhaustion. Every time Claire left the hospital, she looked like she had just survived a storm. Her skin had lost its glow, her eyes became sunken, and she couldn't seem to shake the constant fatigue. She had told herself in the beginning that she would bounce back. She would go in for her treatment, endure the rough patches, and then move on. But the recovery was never quick. Each day seemed worse than the last. The nausea lingered. The fatigue became an unshakable presence. And then there was the hair loss. The day Claire lost her hair was the day the reality began to set in. She had avoided looking in the mirror for days, but that morning she had no choice. She stood at the bathroom sink, staring at herself with a strange, almost detached curiosity. Her once thick, chestnut hair was thinning, falling out in small clumps as she ran her fingers through it. The floor was littered with strands, a visual representation of her unraveling life. She reached for the brush, running it through her hair one last time, and watched as it came away in her hands. It didn't seem real. She wanted to scream. She wanted to break down. But there was no time for that. Instead, Claire put on her sunglasses, trying to hide the evidence from the world. No one could see this. Not yet. She couldn't let them see her falling apart. At work, Claire continued to act as though nothing had changed. She kept a tight grip on the facade, even when it was clear that the weight of her treatment was starting to take its toll. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but she pushed through. The meetings became harder to attend, her focus slipping as the chemo took its toll on her mind. Her colleagues, once unaware of her condition, started to notice the way she kept to herself more, the way her energy had drained. They would ask if she was okay, and Claire would always respond with a quick, forced smile.
I'm fine. Just tired.
It was the same answer every time. She was fine. But with each passing day, her body became more of a reflection of the disease that had already begun to take over her life. The nausea, the weakness, the inability to concentrate, it was all becoming too much. But still, Claire pressed on, never letting the reality break through. One day, Claire stumbled through a meeting at work, her hands shaking as she shuffled through her notes. The air felt thick, as if the very atmosphere was pushing down on her. Her thoughts were clouded, her vision blurred. She barely heard the others in the meeting. She was only half present, her mind elsewhere, clinging to the life she used to have. But then it happened. The dizziness became overwhelming. Her vision darkened, and before she could catch herself, Claire collapsed forward, her body hitting the conference table with a loud thud. Everything went black. When she woke up, she was in the hospital again, and this time there was no denying the truth. She had pushed herself too far. The doctor's words were gentle, but they hit her like a hammer.
You need to stop. You can't keep pretending everything is okay.
And yet, Claire wasn't ready to listen. In the following weeks, her body grew weaker, and the treatments grew harder to endure, but her mind held fast to the lie. She still told herself she was fine, still convinced that it would all be over soon. It wasn't real. This wasn't her life. But the truth was clear now. She was getting sicker by the day, and each step she took on the road of treatment was just another step toward the reality she refused to accept. It had been a few months since Claire had started her treatment, and her life had become an endless cycle of hospital visits, pills, and barely survived workdays. Her body, once a source of pride and vitality, now felt alien. Every step was heavier than the last. The weight of what she was enduring had begun to seep into her bones, turning each movement into a struggle. Her reflection in the mirror was a ghost of the woman she used to be. Pale, fragile, and haunted. But Claire still wasn't ready to admit it. The morning started like any other, with Claire forcing herself to get out of bed. She could feel the exhaustion wrapping around her like a shroud, her limbs sore from the latest round of chemotherapy, her skin clammy and feverish. But she pushed it all down as she always had. She stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash over her, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. She had an important meeting at work after all, and nothing could stop her from showing up. She had to keep going. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror after she finished. Her hair, which had started to thin weeks ago, had almost entirely fallen out. What remained was patchy and uneven, a stark reminder of the battle she was fighting. She had shaved what was left a few days earlier, but still, there was no escaping the reality. She stood there for a moment, staring at herself, not quite recognizing the woman before her. Her eyes were too tired, too sunken. The person staring back at her wasn't the vibrant, confident Claire she had been just a year ago. She was no longer that woman. But she didn't have time for this. She didn't have time to acknowledge what was happening. Work was becoming increasingly difficult. Claire tried to keep up appearances to stay the course, but her mind was becoming more and more scattered. The simple tasks she once performed with ease now took all her energy to complete. Every email, every phone call, every decision felt like it required more effort than it was worth. She found herself zoning out during meetings, staring at the blank whiteboard in front of her, unable to focus on the numbers and strategies her team was discussing. Her body, once a well-oiled machine, now felt like a prison, one that was growing tighter with every passing day. Her colleague, Sarah, noticed the change long before Claire acknowledged it. During one meeting, Sarah had leaned over to her, concern written all over her face.
Claire, are you okay? You've been off lately. You don't look well.
Claire had just smiled and nodded quickly, brushing it off as if it were nothing.
I'm just tired.
She said, her voice too sharp.
You know how it is. Busy week.
But even she knew that it was more than just exhaustion. It wasn't just the late nights or the heavy workload. There was something deeper, something she couldn't outrun. But she wouldn't let Sarah see it. Not yet. The next few days were the hardest. Claire found herself unable to get out of bed. She had told herself that she just needed a few more hours of sleep, that this was just another bout of exhaustion.